His name was Bill, and he was eking out his existence again, working for a useless company, doing a useless job. When he looked in the mirror, he wondered where that tall, dark, and if not handsome, at least pretty good-looking guy from high school and college had gone. His hair was thinning, his waist was expanding, and his energy levels were at zero. If it weren't for the love of his family, his wife Susan, and his two sons, Frank and Mike, he wouldn't know what to do. At 6 feet tall, if not slouched under the weight of the world, and weighing just over 205 pounds, he wasn't in bad shape, but he was no longer the distance runner he had been in high school. He was exhausted after another 70-hour work week. It was killing him, literally, but it was worth it when he saw the joy in his family's eyes when he could afford to buy what they asked for. It was Friday, and he was almost home, mentally already enjoying the upcoming weekend with his wife and children. But what really bothered him was a proposal from an old friend from college, contacted with him a few weeks ago, about making Bill his partner and not just an employee. This would mean moving, but the working hours would not be any longer than they are now, and besides, he would receive not only a salary, but also a share of the partner's profits. Finally, a light at the end of a tunnel. Bill finally made it home after the 20-minute drive took an hour and a half due to an accident. He sat in his car in the driveway and breathed a sigh of relief. He leaned his head back against the headrest, closed his eyes, and let the memories of the past wash over him. Bill was an indifferent student in high school. To be honest, he was slacking off. If studying hard earned him an A, but minimal effort earned him a B, he chose B. So when it came time to go to college, he was in a quandary. He could go to Raccoon City State University, or perhaps some school. So the choice fell on Sucker, pronounced Sucker. Yes, an exclamation point is required. He wandered back and forth for the first 2 years, a little of this, a little of that. It felt more like a continuation of his school laziness than an education, until two very different and separate things happened to him. The first was that he was taking an introductory electronics course when one day the teacher handed out copies of an article written by a friend of his, an engineer at EMI, about the latest technology in medicine computed axial tomography CT or CT scanner. It turned out that some genius had combined X-ray technology with the latest advances in microcomputing. The CT scanner used multiple X-rays to create a cross-section of the object being examined. The CT scanner showed a three-dimensional image of the body on a CRT screen rather than on photographic film. Bill was shocked. After the lecture, he approached the teacher and began bombarding him with questions. Finally, to avoid further questions, the teacher promised to set Bill up with his friend at EMI. Bill has found his place in the world. Second, he met Susan. More precisely, he was late for class, broke into the door of the philological faculty building, and knocked one student down. Yes, he knocked me down. She was thrown back 4 feet and fell on her back, unconscious. Bill almost followed her, fainting when he saw what he had done. For the first few moments, he thought he had killed her. Susan came to her senses after they met, but soon realized that she liked being close to Bill and receiving help from him. Susan wasn't evil, at least not in her own way, and if you had asked her, she would have told you about all the Save the Ants and Help the Starving Anteaters groups she belonged to. The discrepancy between these two examples had never occurred to her. However, she knew one thing for sure: she had plans for her life, and it looked like a major piece of the puzzle had just arrived. She wanted a husband who would be a good provider for her and their future children. She also needed a husband who wasn't too bad in terms of looks. But what she really needed was a husband she could control. Susan saw how her father ran their home, and although there was nothing wrong with that or her childhood, she wanted to be in charge, not follow someone else. Susan began actively pursuing Bill, and by the time they were ready to graduate, Bill had turned into what most men become: yes, honey, no, honey, whatever you say, honey, pathetic henpecked. Everything Bill did, said, or thought went through Susan's filter. Will she like it? Will it make her happy? And so on. Soon after the wedding, Susan decided that it was time to finally tie Bill to her and trim off what wings he still had, so she became pregnant. No, the children were his. He just didn't know that they had sex not for pleasure, but so that Susan could get pregnant. He thought they were having great honeymoon sex. Susan calculated her most favorable days. She finally got pregnant and told Bill that they must have made a mistake or something went wrong, while biting her bottom lip and making the big doe eyes that all husbands know. Frank was born, and 2 years later Mike was born. Susan stayed home and raised the children. Over time, as his family grew and financial responsibilities came with it, both Emmy and Bill discovered, around the same time, that while Bill would never be a powerful force in the plant, he sure as hell was a real equipment maintenance guy in the field. It was as if the devices were talking to him, telling him what was wrong, more before he started work. So Bill became Emmy's top field technician. Unfortunately for him, there were many CAT systems and the workload was brutal. Bill finally straightened up and shook his head to clear his mind of the cobwebs of memories. This was his chance to break out of his routine and gain control of his life. According to his friend, Bill will have full control of all field work and technical support for the equipment. His friend was going to run a business and a parts warehouse. It was a match made in heaven. With new strength in his legs, Bill got out of the car and almost skipped towards the front door. He was home and life was good. He shouted to everyone when he entered the house, "Guys, I'm home and I have great news." Susan came out of the kitchen with a worried expression that was just beginning to be reflected in her thoughts. Bill wasn't acting like his usual self. The usual was good. Change, no. Not if she wanted to maintain control and the status quo. Bill, proud of himself and filled with joy, called his beloved family into the living room to share the news with them. He told his family about his friend's proposal, talked incessantly, and did not notice the lack of enthusiasm in his wife and children. He explained how his friend's company worked and how her will fit in, that he will become a partner. He explained that a new job would mean moving, but the new city was vibrant and growing, and they could afford a much better house. He finally realized that he wasn't getting anything like an enthusiastic response and just fell silent. "No," Susan finally exclaimed, "I'm not going to move to another city. When we move, it will be after the boys go to college, and then it will be to Sherman Oaks on the north side. All the really important and interesting people live there, and I want to be there." Mike said, "Yes, Dad. I like my school. All my friends are here. If we move, I'll have to start all over again, make new friends." "It's not fair," Frank chimed in. "Come on, Dad. I'm a senior. I just have entered into the first team of the football team. Becky said we'd be dating after I gave her my letter jacket, and I wanted to take her to the fall prom." Susan went into the kitchen, letting the boys finish the job of ruining Bill's plans. When she returned, she said, "Bill, the issue is resolved. You will tell your friend that it was very kind of him to make such an offer, but you cannot accept it. Next time something like this comes up, you will come to me first before making promises you cannot keep." Susan allowed herself a small smile. "Besides, do you really think you're good enough to be a partner? Well, seriously, you've held the same position at Emmy for the last 15 years. If you were really good, wouldn't you have been promoted by now?" Bill ground his teeth, angry at what he had to say. I wanted to scream that he had rejected promotions and new job offers before, all because I didn't want to disrupt the life of my family. Susan looked at Bill as his face turned red and his jaw tensed to prevent him from saying anything he would regret. Susan said, "Go and wash up, Bill. Dinner is ready, and it's time to stop this nonsense." Susan turned, ignoring Bill and his news. She walked into the kitchen, saying, "You too, go to the table." She was happy and walked to the kitchen with a light gait. She managed to thwart Bill's plans and further strengthen her control over him. After a rather dismal dinner, during which Bill stewed in his own juices, Frank and Mike ate huge portions, Susan drank more wine than she ate. The boys said they were going out. Leaving the mess on the table, they hurried to the door. "Bye, Mom," they shouted as they left the house. Frank and Mike walked out of the house giggling. "Wow, Mom scolded Dad really badly. She really put him in his place," Frank said. "She heckled him so much that if she said poop, he would ask, 'How much?'" They both laughed. Mike looked at his brother. I don't want to move either, but don't you think Mom shouldn't have humiliated Dad like that? What if he gets angry at Mom and leaves? Frank laughed again. This old man knows he'll never find anyone as hot as Mom, especially who would put up with all that fat he's carrying around. Mike laughed back. I think you're right. He really is a useless piece of crap. But he has a big wallet. Frank grinned. You're right. You're useless at everything except bringing in money. I think you and I can get Mom to pressure him into buying us a car this summer, if he works more than a few hours. The boys slapped each other's hands before going their separate ways. The problem with power is that it corrupts, and the more absolute power becomes, the more absolutely it corrupts. This is what happened to Susan over the years. As her power over Bill increased, she began to believe that she was somehow better than him and that her desires are most important. Bill's wants and needs, her marriage vows, etc. She mentally went from wanting to be strong but loving a partner to the feeling that Bill was created to do her bidding when and how she demanded it. Susan began spending more time with friends who were single, listening to their stories of sexual adventures and fantasies. She never wondered if what they were saying was true, or, more importantly, if perhaps their actions and attitudes led to their multiple divorces. The more time she spent listening to their philosophy of life and superiority of women, the more she believed in it. The narcissistic control freak that had been lurking in the depths of her soul had finally come to the fore. Her mind burned with visions of how she had complete control over Bill financially, emotionally, and sexually. In truth, Susan already controlled Bill's sex life, basically saying no, but the thoughts of her friends and the new world order they preached resonated with her narcissistic soul. Yes, everything will change again. Bill was still seething from how his wife and children had rejected his news months ago. He was tempted to tell his friend that he would take the job. If only Susan would support him against the kids, he knew things would be fine within a few months. When he arrived at his house, he noticed that his usual place was occupied by someone else's car. He knew their friends' cars, but this one was new. Entering the house, he saw his wife and a stranger sitting on his sofa. Bill, dear, said Susan, this is Tyrone Jared Smith. He and I have something we need to discuss with you. Bill didn't like the way it looked. Susan sat very close to Tyrone. In fact, they were holding hands. Bill felt his blood pressure rise, and with it, the acid in his stomach. Damn, here comes the ulcer. Bill, me and Tyrone have been dating for about a month now, and we're tired of hiding behind your back, she said. Without a hint of guilt and remorse, she continued, women need more sex than one man can provide. This is how nature intended. A woman finds courageous men to keep her happy, and the men are happy because the woman allows them to take whatever they can. It's just the way it is that men on their own cannot satisfy all a woman's needs. Susan looked at Bill to see how he would take the news. She saw Bill's jaw tighten and the veins in his neck stand out. She needed to reassure Bill a little, so she continued her explanation. Bill, it's not that I don't love you, I do. And it's not that you're always so tired and exhausted and can't cope with things. Everything is as it is. Bill was on the verge of a stroke. His blood pressure was through the roof. With his jaw clenched, he whispered, Susan, what the hell are you talking about? Get that bastard out of my house, and by the way, why don't you go with him? Susan made an offended face. Bill, Tyrone is my guest in our house. He's not going anywhere. I don't like your tone. Before you got so arrogant, I was going to let you join me and Tyrone in our bedroom later so you can see how happy he makes me. Now, I'm not sure I want you there. Bill was on edge. He shouted, join you. Look at you. Are you crazy? I don't accept this, and I do not want you sleeping with that bastard in my house or anywhere else. Susan smiled evilly. Bill, you'll just have to accept that Ty and I are sleeping with each other and will continue to do so. Tyrone had a pleased smile on his face. Hey, bro, I'm not taking your woman. She can stay here, and you can feed her and everything. I just want to study having sex with her. I don't need no crazy bitch hanging on me all the time. Susan snuggled even closer to Tyrone. "See, darling, Tyrone is not trying to take me away from you. You are still my husband. I love you and will stay with you until death do us part. It's just a biological necessity. A woman needs as much sex as she can handle, and one man, especially a white man, cannot satisfy everyone her needs." Bill could not stand it and rushed at Tyrone. Then everything went dark. Bill woke up. He was still in the living room and Susan was still sitting on the couch, but that bastard Tyrone was no longer in sight. "I hope you're pleased," said Susan. "Poor Tyrone hurt his hand on your face and had to leave before he could properly say goodbye to me." Bill went up to the downstairs toilet and turned on the taps. He washed his face. Looking in the mirror, he saw that his nose was not broken, but his developed black eye. Susan stood behind him and rebuked his behavior, repeating her nonsense about nature and sex not being love and so on. She suggested talking about it or even seeing a marriage counselor to help Bill understand how things were going. A few hours later, Bill tried to tune out her speeches. His head hurt, and he couldn't see well due to a swollen eye. Finally, to shut up Susan's chatter, Bill agreed to go to a marriage counselor with her. In fact, he hoped that she could be made to understand how her thoughts and actions were harming not only Bill, but the marriage and family as a whole. There wasn't much hope, but it was a tiny spark. Basically, he saw that his life was a complete torment, and besides, he married a tormentor. Susan put her arms around Bill's neck and tried to kiss him on the lips. She was so happy that Bill finally came to her program. She knew he was still very angry, but she also knew that he would eventually do whatever she wanted. All she had to do was give him a little sweet, and he would go back to being the obedient lump of clay she married. Bill turned his head away at the last moment, and Susan kissed him on the cheek. He was still seething inside, but between the emotional attack and the physical attack, he was unable to continue fighting. He was confident, however, that he would not give in to Susan's sexual advances. This was what brought him to where he was now. Before calling it a day, he contacted his friend Mo, a couple lawyer from Scream, wrote and how for a divorce lawyer recommendation. Mo was able to arrange a meeting with one of the partners, Lawrence Curley, Howe, the next day. Bill has entered to meet with a divorce lawyer at noon the next day. He explained what he knew and what he suspected to this tired-looking man. "Okay," said Larry, "I think I understand your position. Now let me explain the law to you." Larry looked at Bill over his thick glasses. "You're a complete mess. In the ass with a capital letter. Your wife will fight any divorce proceedings, and you will be crushed and spat out by the legal system. At the end of the day, your wife will get your house, your cars, half your assets, and half your pension. You will pay her alimony and child support. You will be financially responsible for your son's college education. If you're lucky, you'll live in a box under the railroad bridge south of town, praying to die of a heart attack soon." Bill left the meeting more depressed than when I walked in. The following Monday, Bill came home to a quiet house. He walked around the ground floor and, not finding anyone, went upstairs to change clothes. As he approached his bedroom door, he heard sounds. He had just put his hand on the doorknob, ready to burst into the lovers, when a voice came from behind him. "What are you doing here, White?" Bill turned around and was faced with a 6'4" black wall of muscle. "This is my house." "What the hell are you doing here?" Bill demanded. The stranger grinned. "So you are that cuckold. Tyrone said you'll be around here somewhere. My name is Jamal," he said, extending his hand. Bill looked at Jamal and his hand as if they were from another planet. "Why do I have to shake this idiot's hand?" Bill shouted. "I want you and that idiot to leave right now." Once again, everything went dark for Bill. He came to his senses when the house was dark and quiet. His head hurt like hell, and he thought he had some loose teeth. Having cleaned himself up, he went downstairs to drink beer. Walking past the office, he noticed that the TV was on, but the volume was turned down to a minimum. Susan looked up when she heard Bill move. "Bill," she said, patting the couch next to her, "come sit with me for a minute." Bill moved a little further into the office, but did not sit where Susan indicated. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have invited Ty and his friend so close to the time you came home. Ty came around 9, right after you left for work, and took care of me until his friend Jamal came around noon. I must have lost track of time. Sorry. It won't happen again," Susan said. Bill looked at her carefully. "Are you saying you won't sleep with Tyrone or Jamalim?" "No, stupid. I'm saying I'd better plan so you don't catch us again," she smirked. "Then tell me, dear wife, why I must remain in this hell," Bill growled. "Because, dear husband, if you don't stay, you'll pay me everything you earn, and I'll still sleep with Ty and his friends," Susan replied with a small smile on her lips. Everything was repeated again and again, almost all night long. Zan continued to express her view of the world and suggested going to a counselor to help Bill understand the whole picture, and Bill said that he did not want her to sleep with anyone else but him. Finally, in order to get some sleep, Bill agreed to go to a consultant of Susan's choosing. As Bill and Susan entered the consultant's office, he noticed several awards from organizations such as Women Against Misogyny and the New Age Transcendentalist Coalition hanging prominently on the wall. A matronly-looking woman with gray hair sat at the table. She resembled a bulldog ready to bark at the whole world. "Dr. Hooper will be ready to see you in a few minutes," she said. Bill didn't feel good about it. Everything was so staged, so according to the script. Unfortunately for him, he didn't know the script or his role in it. After about 20 minutes, the door opened and a middle-aged woman with graying hair, sagging breasts, and a blurred figure came out. She had the tight skin typical of those who have had a facelift, but it looked more fake than her smile. "Hello," said the harpy. "I am Dr. Elaine Hooper. Please come to my office." She didn't apologize for the wait, and from Susan's complete lack of irritation, Bill suspected that the delay was part of the plan and Susan was aware. After Bill and Susan expressed their expectations for the sessions, Dr. Hooper began repeating many of the same things Susan had been saying over the past few weeks. "So you see, Bill, it's not that Susan wants to cheat on you, it's that you're not coping and not satisfying one of life's most critical needs, good sex. According to you, you work long hours and are never there when Susan needs you. You should be happy that she found a way to get her needs met and still includes you in her life. This is a sign of a very loving relationship. She is willing to compromise her normal, natural biological needs to accommodate your selfish desires." Bill stopped listening and participating. His head was buzzing, and it seemed to him that the world was a mass of futility and despair. He sat there for the rest of the session and, like a zombie, followed Susan to the car. After 3 more sessions in which Dr. Hooper continued to place blame on him, Bill decided to stop it. He told Susan that he did not accept what happened in the sessions, and that if Susan wanted to save the marriage, they would go to someone he chose. With a slight grin, Susan agreed. She knew that all therapists studied in the same schools, took the same courses, and would see everything the same way, correctly, the way she did. One evening, in a state of complete despair, Bill went into a bar for a quiet drink. He just couldn't go home where he knew Tyrone was with Susan. He had already drunk 2 beers and was thinking about ordering a third when he heard the front door open and close. An unknown man approached the bar and took one of the chairs to the side. Quickly sitting down on a chair, he ordered a martini with blue sapphire gin in a ratio of 4-1. Rubbing his hands, the man looked around the room. His eyes settled on Bill, sitting sullenly in the distance, and he said, "Hey, buddy, can you pass the peanuts?" Bill indifferently pushed the bowl of salted nuts toward the stranger. "Hold it," he said. The stranger looked at Bill and asked, "Why so sad, buddy?" Bill looked at him and thought for a moment about telling him to fuck off, but then decided to just say nothing. The bartender placed his drink in front of the stranger and retreated with several bills, which he placed on the bar. "Look, dude, it's none of my business, but you look like someone just killed your dog, or you just found out your wife is cheating on you," the stranger said. Extending his hand, he said, "My name is Greg." Bill shook his hand and said, "Bill, sorry, not the best conversationalist right now. As it turns out, Your second guess was correct. Sorry about that, Bill, Greg said. If you want to tell me about this, I don't promise a solution, but I promise to listen. And Bill told what his life had become lately. Greg kept their glasses full and listened intently to Bill's story. Finally, Bill reached the present moment. Greg looked at him and said, "Well, Bill, it looks like you're really screwed, and then some. So what are you going to do about it?" Bill looked at Greg through his alcohol-clouded eyes and said, "What can I do? The system is against me, against any husband. They say it's a man's world, but really we gave it to the bitches." Greg chuckled slightly as he pulled out a business card from his wallet. "Here you go," he said. "I was in your position 2 years ago, and this guy showed me the way out." Greg put the card in front of Bill and said, "He's good. What do you have to lose?" With that, Greg stood up and walked out the door. Bill looked at the card for a long time before he picked it up, put it in his shirt pocket, and decided it was time to go home. Well, at least to his house. When he returned home, Bill collapsed on the sofa in his office and plunged into an alcoholic coma. Susan didn't even check to see if he was okay and just went to bed. In the morning, Bill's head was pounding. My mouth felt like the entire French Foreign Legion had walked through it in sweaty socks. Even my brain hurts. He stumbled into the downstairs toilet, thinking his hell would end. Anyway, Bill told Susan he wanted to try a consultant named Zoran Stransky. She looked at him like he was looking at an insect under a microscope. "Zoran Stransky," she said. "What kind of name is this?" Bill stood his ground until Susan said she would check on him and give Bill an answer. The next day, Susan called Dr. Hooper asking about it. Zoran, to whom her husband wanted to go. As soon as she said Zoran's name, her therapist began to argue against the idea. "He's a charlatan," she said. "Strange doesn't follow the rules. He makes it up as he goes along." Susan thanked Dr. Hooper and said she would contact her later. She was a little stunned. Where did Bill find this man? Why was he willing to go to him when he was completely against Dr. Hooper? The more she thought about it, the less confident she became in her next move. She had almost everything: a husband who did what he was told, who earned very good money, who provided her with everything she wanted. She had lovers who satisfied her sexual needs. And finally, and most importantly, she had control, complete control. She knew that if she could put the finishing touches on Bill, she would have it all. She thought, maybe if I give him sex tonight, I can get him back into the program. Despite sex and one merciful intimacy, Susan could not dissuade Bill from wanting to go to this Zoran. So 3 weeks later, Susan and Bill walked into the office of a man her therapist and friends had strongly advised her to stay away from. None of the local marriage counselors Susan contacted, female or male, approved of Zoran Stransky's methods, especially because he went against everything they stood for, but mainly because he was not a professional. He had neither a doctorate, nor a master's degree, nor even a bachelor's degree in any of the social sciences. He had several doctorates from quite renowned universities in fields such as chaos theory, mathematics, and physics, and he passed the state licensing exam as a marriage and family counselor. But he wasn't in any of the directories. His clients found him through word of mouth, like Greg found Bill, or through a small ad he placed in the local newspaper. "Is your wife cheating on you? Is life playing tricks on you? Consultants try to shift the blame, so is it your fault? Call Zoran Stransky at 555-555-5555. Zoran entered the room through a side door and invited Bill and Susan to sit on the chairs placed at a slight angle to each other in front of his desk. He sat down at his own table and asked if they would like coffee. Both Bill and Susan shook their heads in denial, so Zoran poured himself some coffee from an old percolator into an antique handleless cup. Taking it in his hand, he leaned back in his chair and addressed Bill and Susan. "Just a reminder to both of you, I am not a traditional marriage counselor. I'm not here to fix your marriage or your relationship. I am a strategist in life. My specialty is chaos theory, and as I've noticed, marriage is pretty chaotic at its best. I will develop a profile of each of you, determine how you interact with each other, and then give my opinion on what each of you should do in the future. It is possible that you both need reconciliation, but this is usually not the case. Is it clear? Wonderful. You are here at Bill's request, and I will act as his friend. Remember, a friend does for you what he thinks you need, and this is not always what you want. Now, I understand you have children. Both Bill and Susan nodded. Okay, said Zoran. How many are there, and how old are they? Susan said, we have two sons, Frank, who is 17, and Mike, who is 15. Zoran looked at her and asked, then where are they? Susan tried to explain that they were still children and that marriage problems were not their concern. No, said Zoran, they are adults in everything except legal title. They are affected by family dynamics as well as influencing them. I have to see them too. Okay, then make an agreement with my administrator on the way out. Bill, Susan, Frank, and Mike were all gathered in Zoran's office 2 weeks after the last interview. Bill was more than a little nervous. Susan looked around, grinning, thinking that everything was going according to her plan. Despite her friend's warnings about Zoran, she was confident that she had convinced him of the correctness of her thoughts. This should have ended Bill's futile attempt to gain control in the marriage. Frank and Mike sat in their chairs, playing with their smartphones, completely bored by what was happening. Curry tonight. Can we stop at the Lucky Goat on the way home? Mike asked. He knew the curry would give the old man ulcers all night, the weakling. Frank grinned, noticing his father's internal mockery. Zoran entered the room, looked around those present, and sat down at his table. He opened the folder, read it for a few moments, and then looked at the faces awaiting his words. Okay, he said, after all the interviews and my research into your lives. He stopped when he saw the shock on everyone's faces. What? Did you think I would take your words at face value as fact? Don't think. I have my own network of researchers. They're mostly paralegals, but they know how to recognize things. So, let's get started, Zoran said, opening the top folder. Susan was a little dismayed that someone was snooping into her affairs. Even worse, it sounded like these someones might be criminals. Zoran looked at Susan. Susan, you selfish, immature bitch. Every aspect of your life is determined by what is best for you. You do nothing to support Bill, not even emotionally. You spend money thoughtlessly and expect Bill to earn more. Your views on marital fidelity are complete nonsense. Your thoughts that women are better than men and more evolved, so they are allowed to have more than one lover at a time, especially within marriage, gives me a headache. Zoran pinched the bridge of his nose with the fingers of his left hand. Susan, you are nothing more than a depraved woman who thinks herself above her station. Zoran turned to Frank and Mike and said, you are narcissistic, self-righteous pieces of crap. You think the world revolves around you and your desires. You have no respect for your father or what he sacrificed for you. He had plans, dreams, and goals. It's not that you don't understand or accept his dreams, it's that you don't think he's even worthy of having dreams. Hell, deep down you call it an ATM, a money machine. What the hell, boys? Even for teenagers, can you be more selfish? Frank's eyes were blazing with anger. No one spoke to him like that. Who is this old fool to say that? Frank jumped out of his chair, clenched his fists, and stepped towards Zoran's desk. Zoran pulled out a rather large revolver from his desk drawer and placed it on the table, pointing it towards Frank and Mike. Without emotion, Zoran said, son, you are several inches taller, several pounds heavier, and decades younger than me. If you take another step toward my desk, I'll fear for my life and use that to shoot you in the chest. Are we sorted out? Frank slowly sat back down in his chair, his eyes larger than saucers. This was the first time his size and strength did not give him the upper hand in a conflict. Mike looked like he had shit himself and tried to look as humble and obedient as possible. Zoran looked at Bill. Bill, you're a fool. You have no self-awareness or self-respect. You are driving yourself into the ground day after day, trying to cope with the unreasonable demands of this vixen and these two worthless parasites. They don't love you. They love what you can do for them. On your deathbed, They will be there to be the first to remove the watch from your wrist. Zoran continued. My recommendation, Bill, is that you get as far away from these three toxic individuals as possible. Don't file for divorce because you will be stripped to your skin in the court system. Move, pay the minimum to show that you are legally fulfilling your obligations, mortgage, taxes, and half of utilities. No food, no clothes, no entertainment. Susan can find a job, and so can Frank and Mike. Separate your finances because she will probably try to take your existing savings and checking account if she hasn't already. Susan looked down. There was Bill's answer. She had already taken their money for herself. Is this bitch's car hers? Asked Zoran. Bill nodded yes. Registered in her name? Zoran asked again. Bill nodded yes again. Then cancel her insurance, Zoran said. She can pay for it herself or take the car off the road. Do these boys have a car? Asked Zoran. Bill shook his head no. Okay, then don't buy them a car and don't give them access to yours. If they take her, call the police and let me know about the theft. And of course, don't fund college. If they can get in and want to study, let them finance it themselves. Finally, move. I suggest you accept that job offer from your friend, if it's still valid, and get away from these bloodsuckers. Save yourself. Zoran took out another folder from the desk drawer. Here you go, he said. Here are all the legal documents you'll need to split up your finances, file for legal separation, start legal proceedings to get back half of the money you stole, etc. Simply fill out the forms, take them to the county clerk's office, and submit them. Good luck. Oh yeah, by the way, Zoran said, I just remembered something. Zoran took a piece of paper from the stack on the table and leafed through it for a few moments. It appears that one Tyrone J. Smith had an accident this morning. He slipped several times in the shower. Doctors at Raccoon Hospital don't think he will survive. Also, one Jamal Freeman was hit by a bus last night. He was crossing Oak Street at the corner of Raccoon Avenue without waiting for the light to turn green and stopped in the middle of the intersection to tie his shoes. Express bus #42 was traveling just over 45 miles per hour when it was struck. Police investigated, but between the driver's account, the fact that Mr. Freeman was dressed all in black and two witnesses at the scene, it was ruled an accident. Zoran leaned back in his chair. Susan leaned over, crying into her hands. Frank and Mike huddled as far into their chairs as possible, never having experienced such skin breakdown. Bill was a little shocked, more than anything by the fact that someone other than himself saw what he had been trying to deny to himself for a long time and was willing to put it into words, and not guilty his. Bill grabbed Zoran's hand with both of his. He shook her vigorously, beaming like a fool. Thank you, thank you, thank you, he said. Bill jumped out of his chair and almost ran to the door. Susan looked after him. I saw him take a mobile phone out of his pocket as he walked out. In her mind, she already knew that Bill had begun to implement Zoran's recommendations. Zoran looked at the three depressed people. Zoran turned to Susan. I advise you to get off your fat ass and get a job. You will need an income to support yourself and these two parasites. As for you two, Zoran said through pursed lips, if you haven't figured it out yet, the freebie train has just left, and you're not on it. I think it's too late to improve your grades for academic scholarships, but who knows, maybe you'll be able to do something. He opened the drawer again and took out two thin folders. Here is a list of all the trade schools in the state, as well as a list of military recruiters in Raccoon City. I would not advise you to apply to the latter, as you are clearly not suitable for the service. But I would be remiss if I did not mention it. Mike, I think you need to get away from your brother's influence. Find your identity. Otherwise, you will be his servant all your life. Zoran looked down at the table and began taking notes. After a few minutes, he raised his head. Are you still here? Is there anything else you want or need to know? Fine. Get out of here. Oh yes, Susan, since Bill has already left, please pay my bill to the receptionist on the way out. If you miss payment today, I'll call the police tomorrow. Have a good day. Zoran returned to his papers, effectively ignoring Susan, Frank, and Mike. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.